It demands that we tell sinners the whole truth.
We will not go quietly into the night.
Voice of truth says this is for my glory.
Christian Cornerstone Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Christian Cornerstone Podcast, CC412, Equipping the Saints. I have to get those names right, figured out. Anyways, we exist to equip the saints for the work of the ministry and building up of the body of Christ. So proud of you for getting the banner up in time. Co-host, Mr. Michael White, and myself, Mr. Bill Ricksecker. Today, we're going to be diving into, I guess it's not really diving much into, depends on what we're diving into. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Last week, we left off with divorce itself and the significance, the importance with marriage. Didn't really talk too much about marriage itself, but more about divorce. Who are we to divorce, which we'll give you a short recap in a minute. But in this episode here, we want to kind of just dive into a particular article we didn't get to share last week. 10 bad reasons, or I would say 10 excuses of divorce, 10 bad excuses for divorce. So before we get into that, I have to ask Mr. Michael White what he's been up to this past week. Anything exciting happened? Because I actually have something exciting that I want to tell you that I completely forgot about that I hope I remember by the time you get done.
Okay, we'll keep it short. But yeah, I'm coming out with a new service for my business called AMA. And usually that is like Ask Me Anything. But my mentor already does this. I'm like, I can't copy him. I need to take inspiration. I'm like, Michael. So it's an Ask Michael Anything, because I had helped someone out from my old job. She had asked me a bunch of questions and I did like a video recording response back. And she thought it was super helpful. And for my own business, I have it set up. I'm like, you can jump on a free call with me, but people I think are afraid of that or I don't have the credibility and social proof yet. But I was like, this is even easier. You just send me your questions and the first one is free. And then I'll send a nice video back walking through each thing for like 30 minutes. So I'm launching that tomorrow. I still don't think a ton of people are going to jump on it, to be honest, but I think it sounds really fun and is like a good way for me to get into the mentoring side, because I can take all the time I need to look stuff up if I need to. But I think a lot of it is geared towards aspiring folks. So that's something intentional because I've been in their shoes. So should be pretty easy. Not easy, but like not as hard as like someone who's been in it for years, who's asking very specific, like, how are my ROIs and the click list? And I'm like, I do not know.
Yeah. Well, and see, like we talked about this, like, I don't know, some time ago about mentorship. I think that was one of our topics we discussed. I don't remember. But I mean, everybody at every single point in life has something that they can give to somebody else. And your perspective on how far you are, how well educated, how qualified you are, that's your judgment. That's not something I would make. But even at your current position of experience, yes, that's where I want to go with. You still have something to offer. I think the mentorship idea, is a great approach that you're doing there. But I haven't really been up to too much. I kind of, like I told you, I was, kind of taking a little vacation, vegging out on this nifty little sci-fi game. But, I started working on the New Testament course. Well, let me rephrase that. I think I shared this actually last week. I was already working on it, and I never even heard back in an email. But I figured it's like, okay, I'm going to start making these slides. And I'm having a little bit of difficulty because I want to provide the information, for example, what's in the textbook. And but the problem is I don't want to give everything because I want them to read the textbook. So I started putting the topics, like given basically what's happening here within this course, or at least this particular chapter so far, is that it is just kind of giving a recap of what happened during the intertestament period, which is the 400 years of silence. So it's giving a little bit of a recap there and a short overview of those events. And so I'm kind of trying to give a shorter or overview of those same events, just so that way I can kind of give a little bit of a highlights. It's like, okay, well, here's what we're going to be talking about. Here's what we're going to be talking about. By the way, there's more in the textbook. And I kind of want it to be in like an encouragement, read the textbook.
You need a lot of good hooks. You're like,
Yeah.
get you hooked in, and then you want some more. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I was putting the slides together, and then I got to a point where I realized I was like, I'm putting too much on here.
Oh,
And I think I have about 7 slides for the first lesson. And I'm not, I mean, most of those are maps, but I think personally, if I was to guess, I'd say that's roughly about 30 minutes as far as what it would consist of. And I'm thinking, I was like, okay, there's still like at least another 15 or 20 minutes, for, based on what's provided in a textbook. So I was like, okay, I'm going to shorten this up a little bit. And I kind of figured, like, based on how they have it outlined within the chapter, is like, I think I'm going to try to do an every other one approach. So that way I says, okay, well, this is in the textbook. This is in the textbook. Oh, but wait, there's more.
Mm-hmm. Something I would have just been learning, which I don't know if it applies to this, but is like this what, why, and how when you're creating content of like, what is it you're talking about?
Yeah.
Why is it important? And then kind of how do you want them to take the information from there, like call to action. But
yeah,
I always found that super helpful, and I need to keep remembering it because I like to write a lot. And then I'm like, oh, and the examples are like, do you just take forever to talk about what you're talking? I'm like, sometimes, but I like reading, so it's not a big deal to me. So then I'll delete everything. I'm like, what are we talking about, Michael? One sentence. I'm like, oh,
right.
So sad to just see like less writing, but it's supposed to be helpful, I guess.
Yeah, and that's always difficult for me too, because like you talk about, well, for an example here, we're talking about marriage and divorce. I have the word marriage is on my screen, so I just picked that. But marriage, for an example, you want to talk to somebody about marriage, how help them to, how to do a marriage. You don't want to just say, it's like, okay, love your spouse, take care of them, listen to them, and so on. You want to break that down even further. How do I take care of them? Okay, well, within that aspect, how do I do that? How do I do that? And I mean, there's so much that you can go with that. And, that's how my brain works. I want to give you point 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I also want to give you the sub point of the sub point of the sub point, and expound that as well. So,
yeah, and I think that's the hard divide, because you want to make sure there's enough content. And if someone really wants to learn, then you're like, I want to provide everything because I can help you really learn.
Yeah.
For the masterclass I'm working on, I'm creating the activity guide finally for that. And I'm going through it. I'm like, oh, the first activity is going to take a long time. And it's mostly like going through questions, like kind of the self-reflective and assessment to get started. And I was like, this is going to be so helpful if people actually do it. And so I'm always hanging on those words, which you probably are too. You're like, this is amazing. You will learn about the New Testament if they go through, like, if they like put their heart and soul into like being a good student, and taking it all in and following what you're kind of guiding them through.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And I don't know, it might be a little bit of a biased judgment because this is, stuff that I'm personally interested in. It's a passion of mine and I like doing it. I mean, it's kind of like a hobby for me. So I think my own judgment might be a little bit biased, but I do personally feel as if Christians, regardless of where they're going in life, whether they're going into the pulpit and ministry, when, even a woman, I want to be this, godly woman for my husband, or, do women's ministry stuff or, whatever women do, whatever it is. What's that?
A pastor?
Well, that's why I said ministry stuff.
I'm joking.
Oh, I see. Oh,
we'll have to save that sound clip for you.
I thought you were talking about.
You're like, maybe? I was like, oh, Bill, you've changed a lot after that video.
Another field of ministry. I didn't think you were talking about the whole,
No, I thought that's where you were going. I'm like, no, that's not the Bill I know. But yeah, keep going. Yeah. It is important, no matter what, they're doing.
Well, and that's the interesting thing is that people like to learn. They like to learn enough to get by, I would personally say, at least how society is moving in social media. They want like little snippets. I don't like those. I mean, yeah, they're little fun facts, but at the same time, it's like, give me more. You're just basically giving me a spoonful of deliciousness. Give me the full plate.
The milk, like Paul says, instead of the solid food.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting full off of this glass of milk. I mean, no matter how delicious it is, I like milk. I like strawberry milk. I like chocolate milk. But by the way, side note here, then we can dive into this. Years ago, I bought strawberry syrup for not the first time, but the first time in a long time, and got some milk. Took it home and I got it from the store, of course, and I had a glass of strawberry milk. It's like, oh, this is really good. And so the first glass, I'm just, chugging it. I was like, this is so good. And the second glass, it's like just casually sipping on it. Well, there's a third glass that comes into play. This is really good. And I almost got a fourth one. And then my stomach is starting to hurt at this time. I told a friend of mine, I guess I was talking to years ago. And I told her, I was like, I don't feel right. I feel like I'm about to die. I think I need to go to the hospital. And like, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong?
They're going to pump your stomach for
yes.
what? Strawberry milk.
Yes. And I told him, it's like, I drank too much milk. And I felt terrible. I really felt like I was going to explode.
So no more than 2 glasses or 3?
I don't remember. I mean, this was so long ago. There was at least 3 glasses that were involved. And there might have been a fourth one.
Be safe.
Yeah. So I don't advise that, but I do advise that you drink strawberry milk because it is pretty good, but I do not advise doing my actions as Jesus Christ said about the Pharisees, do as they do, or do as they say, not as they do. So I would personally recommend that. Just don't follow my footsteps. So that is all I have for this. Are we ready to dive into this?
Yeah, let's go.
All right.
Bad excuses for divorce.
Bad excuses, bad reasons. I like excuses. I don't like excuses, but I like the word excuses. I think that's a better fit. But yeah, so last week we didn't really have the chance to get into this. And quite frankly, this is a long, there's a lot here. The topic of marriage and divorce is a huge one. Very important when it comes to any type of, relationship, between a man and a woman. This is something that you look forward to. You get into a relationship because, one, you want companionship, and you also want to be there to take care of this person. I mean, you're turn out to be your best friend. But at the same time, we need to understand that marriage itself is going to have trials. It's going to have some conflict. And there's times in which we might feel as if we want to divorce. We did talk a little bit last week. Actually, I think it was kind of the focus last week. Paul makes it perfectly clear to summarize in verse 10 to the Christians, wife, I'm summarizing all of this, wife, if you leave, you should not divorce your husband, but return to him, be reconciled. To the rest, I say in verse 12, or husband also in that verse, husbands, do not divorce your wife. So in other words, within the Christian marriage, we're commanded not to divorce our spouse. And then we have a section here with a Christian married to an unbeliever. And Paul makes it clear, is like, well, you have these little differences, but if you're living at peace, in fact, actually, I know an individual who's a Christian, but their spouse is not a Christian. But if you agree to live in at peace, what's the definitions here? The wording we have here. If she consents to live with him. So, okay. So this is just consent. If you're in agreement, if everything's all hunky dory, then, go ahead, stay married. And then we have, if the unbeliever leaves, and that one I made clear is that, if unbeliever leaves, if they want to separate, let it be so, for God has called you to peace. So, and as we mentioned here is that, it's not our job to save them. They're the unbeliever who wants out of the marriage is doing what unbelievers do, is doing what sinners do. And that's all of what we've talked about with Corinth. The reason sin happens is because how do I want to word this? Sinners do what sinners do. Does that make sense to you, Michael?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They divorce because it's in their nature. They go off and commit adultery because that's in their nature. They give into lustful thoughts and intentions because that's within their nature.
Go through Proverbs. I'm almost done with. I'm doing that on top of the Bible reading. I'm like, there's so much good here. And it's all like, do not fall into the pit. And then you read that, you're like, the prostitution, they entangle, and you read like, the fool does this, and you're like, ooh, yeah, ooh, I don't want to be called the fool.
Right.
You want to be
Well,
the wise, the righteous. You're like, yes, please, God, give me the wisdom, knowledge.
yeah, and I
understanding.
think that's really a thing that comes with relationships. It is to have that wisdom. And I think that's what heals and even preserves marriages, is because you're wise enough and you're caring enough to realize the particular issues. Let's say, husband, we just got, I don't know, $5,000. Income tax. There you go. Well, I know couples. I think actually these days, if you have kids, you can get back like 10 to 20,000. I think a coworker, I don't remember who. I talked to somebody and they got back between 10 to 15 because of their situation. They're working. They're completely employed with 4 some odd kids, and whatever other tax write-offs, however they got that, it's none of my business. The point is, they got quite a few bucks out of it. Now, just taking that as an example, if we were to take, okay, we've got $10,000 back on our income tax. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use this.
Bank, save it.
Yeah, we'll do this. Wife wants to put it in the bank. Husband, and I'm just
Wants to
kind
buy a
of,
new motorcycle.
I was about to say that, yes.
I know, Bill. I know you.
Well, and see, and that's a curse. It really is, because ever since I got this thing, I'm seeing stuff online and
like more and more money.
I was like,
all
"Ooh,
the
that's
targeted
nice."
ads.
Right, yeah. But yeah, okay. So husband spends that 10 grand, goes out and buys a motorcycle. Did he have that right? It depends on how you look at it. Was there a purpose for that money? Was it going to go to the kids, the savings, investments? Was it going to be for something more responsible? If it was, then I can understand the wife's upset, but that's not a reason why we should divorce. And the wisdom aspect, what you mentioned, Michael, this comes into play. It says, okay, well, my husband just did something stupid. This is not a reason for a divorce. We can get through this. The benefit is this bike's already paid off. Yes, we're out that 10 grand, but it's already paid off. We don't have to worry about it.
I was going to say, get a higher life insurance on the
Yeah,
husband.
yeah,
And if he
right.
does end up getting in an accident, you'll get $250,000. Yeah.
Right. It's like those pictures online, why women live longer than men kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you see all the men doing all sorts of
Speeding
stupid
down.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So, we want to talk about some of the bad reasons for divorce. And I would personally say this, I strongly advise this, that if you are if you're married, specifically, if you're married, the word divorce should never, ever be on your lips. We kind of closed up with that last week, that the moment that it comes to your lips, when you're threatening divorce for whatever reason, even if you're frustrated and angry, that's going to dwell on the other individual. And they're going to be doing things in a means of preventing divorce. And, a type of manipulation can come from that. But I would say even that the one who brings up divorce is not only manipulating and threatening these things, but I would say that the one who brings up divorce is also saying, I don't love you enough, which is actually one of our topics we'll talk about here in a minute. Because when we get into marriage, we should already have this understanding. My spouse is not going to be perfect. My spouse is going to screw up. My spouse is not going to meet all my needs. My spouse is not going to be the perfect individual that I'm looking for. And we need to recognize that and says like, okay, well, this person is basically a 4 out of a 10, but I love them and I'm going to marry them. And so there's more I want to ramble on about that, but we have 10 points here. And I think I'll probably share some thoughts within that. So I don't want to give away too many spoilers ahead of time. Michael, do you want to do what we did here with the questions? We didn't talk about this beforehand, but when we did the questions, we kind of did every other one. You want to do something like that with this one?
Sure.
All right.
I'll let you go first so I can see
I
how you
was
want to
about
run
to
things.
say. All right. So in this first reason here, we're actually sharing this article. I'm going to actually copy paste that into the comments here. And those of you who are listening to the audio, I'll actually have that on the description as well. I would also point out that this comes from churchleaders.com. And it's called 10 Common But Bad Reasons for Divorce. Now, first off, with churchleaders.com, this is not a ministry I would personally endorse. They do have some mixed articles. I don't know how they have it structured, what their purpose is, but there's some progressive and some liberal stuff, some Pentecostal stuff, but there's also some good stuff. And this article itself comes from an individual with very strong biblical theology. This is a particular gentleman I would endorse, Tim Challies. And the article was published October 3rd of 2017. If you haven't checked, Tim Challies actually has his own blog. He shares a lot of good stuff on there. I'd encourage you to check that out. But so this first reason that is a bad excuse as far as why bad excuse to divorce is my spouse isn't a Christian. Or in other words, I wasn't a Christian when I married my spouse. And we've talked about this a little bit. Actually, I don't think we really did expound too much on that. But within this particular text here, Tim Challies says, nowhere in the Bible is this first of our bad reasons to divorce scenes. I'm getting my words mixed up. Okay, nowhere in the Bible is the first of our bad reasons to divorce seen as grounds for not staying married. 1 Corinthians 7, that's kind of ironic. I think we're on that topic right now. 1 Corinthians 7, 12 through 13, Paul very clearly urges men and women in situations not to divorce their unbelieving spouse. And in 1 Peter 3, 1 through 2, women married to unbelievers are called to be subject to their own husbands, so that if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. Rather than seeking for an opportunity to get out of the relationship, Christians are told to seek for opportunities to share the faith with the unbelieving spouse. Now, this is kind of a general thing. There's so much more I'd like to give, but that's going to give away one of the spoilers on one of the comments. But yeah, I mean, when we're married to one flesh. We become one flesh. And to say my spouse isn't a Christian, or my spouse isn't a Christian, or I wasn't a Christian, it's to really try to put a barrier, and I would actually even say an excuse within that. And I can personally understand. Unfortunately I've had that experience. I mentioned last week with my whole marriage experience. My spouse, I hate to say this, but it's true. Was a con artist. Bad choice of words, not a con artist. Put on a mask. Actually, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Would con artist be that? Pretty sure he froze. I'm going to keep going. That is awesome. So anyways, I'm going to actually see here. Michael, I'm going to remove you. I don't know if you can see me or not. Anyways, I hope you come back. So, lost my train of thought here. I have completely lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys. We have a frozen gentleman. Let me bring him back up here because I thought that was kind of funny. Let's see. All right. I had to. Oh, yeah. We have a black screen. Awesome. So we're going to continue on with this and hope he comes back here. So my spouse isn't a Christian. Is that a good reason to divorce? No. What you're saying there is they're not perfect. My spouse isn't perfect. Oh, I think we got him back here. Still got a black screen. We'll keep talking. We'll try hope something happens here. I lost my train of thought. Let me go ahead and dive into this next one here, and we'll kind of see what Tim Challies has to say. We weren't married in the church. This is an interesting one. Matthew 19, verse 6 renders as an illegitimate excuse when it says, when therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. Marriage is sanctioned by God and is not dependent on the context in which these vows are made, regardless of where you were or who you were married. If you have made a covenant in marriage, the Lord expects you to keep it. And this is really the huge thing here. We're married in the church is really just another justification. Welcome back, Mr. Michael.
Can you see me? Can you hear
I
me?
can see you. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Don't you just love technology?
Yeah. Satan's really trying to get at us.
Yeah. So I'm actually on point number 2. Kind of lost.
Yeah, I could hear you and see you the whole time.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we weren't married in the church. Now, when you're getting married, you're not getting married because for the church. You're not getting married to the church. You're getting married because you love this individual. You're getting married, and when you're getting married, you're keeping this covenant. You don't have to get married in a church. You can get married out in the parking lot. You can get married, I don't know, at some wedding venue, or whatever it is, at the beach. People do this all over the world. People get married in different places, and even some cultures don't even have a church. I don't know too much about those other cultures and how they deal with marriage, but you see some pictures and stuff online. They're decorating trees and forest, or sand huts. I mean, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up at this point. But they don't get married in a church. It's like, just because you're not married in a church doesn't mean it's not a legitimate marriage. If you're married and you have if you're there saying, yes, I do, you're performing these vows, and you have witnesses for this, biblically, that's a marriage. So, Michael, do you have any thoughts on that before I make you do number 3?
No, I think that one it's a weird excuse that I'm like, oh, that's when they're grasping at straws.
Right.
They've gone through me like, but we weren't married at a church. And you're like, okay, nowadays, even Christians don't even do churches. Like the old days, I think everyone, even if you weren't a Christian, we got to go to the local church.
Right.
And now, like, even people that are in churches are like, let's go to the beach. Let's do this. And I'm like, oh, okay. I would be more like, what is the most cost effective? Unless someone else is paying for my wedding, then yeah. But it is, I think, if, for myself, if the church body, it's like exciting to be able to have it there if it's your pastor who's officiating. Yeah. So that's just kind of, it'll be different for each person, but definitely not an excuse to try to get out.
Well, and I think it also comes down with, like biblically, you're not required to get married in the church, but I also think, that's really a personal preference. Like my thoughts, I did this with my marriage, or previous marriage, whatever you would like to call it. And I would still do it. I think it's a really great idea to get married in a church. I think it's very wonderful, beautiful, and all that. But my personal thoughts is I would just go up to the courthouse, do it real quick, have like your, small group of people, mom, dad, brothers and sisters on both sides, whoever it is, your closest best friend. That's it. That's my personal preference. Is it right or wrong? That's it. Yes, it's not. You can do it this way. You don't have to do it that way. Or you can make it all extravagant. But my personal thoughts is have a small wedding, have a big celebration. Well, small celebration. No, I'm going to take that back. Small wedding, small celebration, big honeymoon experience.
Honeymoon, right.
Yeah. Yep. So instead of spending however much these things cost, I don't know, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 on the wedding venue itself, why don't you go spend that and go to the Bahamas? Why don't you go to Ireland, Israel, Hawaii, cruise? That's my personal thought. But let's go ahead and number 3. Michael, what do we have?
Number 3 says, I need to get out of this marriage for the sake of my kids. And the author says, this, of course, a justifiable concern, but one that Paul does not neglect to address in 1 Corinthians 7:14. He says, for the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. According to Paul, here is another opportunity to endure for the sake of the gospel, so that your children, too, may see your godly example of faith. However, in the case that your spouse poses a threat of danger, be it emotional or physical abuse, your child's safety is a priority.
Yeah, I would personally have to agree, and I think that last sentence. However, in case of your spouse poses a threat of danger, be it emotional or physical, your children's safety is a priority. I do agree with that. But that is not justifiable reason to divorce. And I actually had somebody, when I was going through my little experience, I had somebody who reached out to me and they gave a scenario, says, hey, I know somebody who's going through, and I think they were asking me because I went through it. They were asking me, I have somebody who's, in an abusive relationship. I can't remember exactly what the full question was, but basically they were asking, I don't remember how it went. But my answer to it was, I don't personally see anything unbiblical or even unloving with removing yourself, and for an example, with the sake of the kids, removing your kids as well from this environment. If, whoever it is, don't care, husband, wife, if one of them is being abusive, and I think both can be guilty, to some degree, depending on, context and what's going on. I don't think it's just this whole abusive thing. I don't think it's just husband's fault. Experience here. The wife can be as well, just in a different way. Well, I don't want to say that either.
They have stories of both. Yeah.
I would. Yeah, both. So
I've watched enough Law and Order SVU. Don't worry. It's been on since the 90s.
I've never watched that. So, but yeah, so I would say if your spouse is being abusive, whether it be emotionally or physical, you're not required to stay in that same building. You are required to love them. You are required not to divorce them, but you are not required to remain in that home, intentionally putting yourself in harm's way. If you have a way out, if you have friends, family, I mean, everybody has friends. I mean, a lot of people say like, well, I don't have friends. Well, you have at least one. I can vouch for that. I don't have a lot of people in my social circle, at least locally. Michael, for example, is in California.
Get yourself to California.
Right.
And then I've got a place.
Yeah, I've got friends in Texas. I've got Michigan. Pretty much all over
Germany,
the world.
right?
Yeah, I got a buddy of mine in Germany, which I still got to get a passport and plan a trip to go see him. So yeah, I need to stop talking to people because Michael, we've talked about, coming over to California and saying, hey, I've got a friend in Texas. I've wanted to do that. I've got I've got everybody all around the world. That's basically saying,
we all need to go to Ohio. That way you don't have to be traveling.
That's a great idea. Great idea.
Throw a party when you launch the Institute.
Right. And so, I mean, if your spouse is being abusive, go somewhere else. Go to your mom's, and stay there. Make it crystal clear to your spouse that's being the abuse, that's doing the abusive behavior. Says, hey, I love you. I'm not going to divorce you because I know we can get through this. With God, all things are possible. He's been through our lives, for however long you're alive, however long you've been married. This particular event that we're going through, we can get through this. But I'm not going to put the children in harm's way. I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. And I'm going to stay here with said individual, whether it be best friend, brother, sister, mom, dad, both, whatever, until we get this thing resolved. I think I would personally say that is the best approach that an individual can take. Because if they're saying I need to get out for the sake of my kids, one, they're saying, okay, your concern is your children before your marriage. Your marriage should be the first concern because by example, you are showing these kids how to be Christian men and women. If you abandon when things get tough, you're teaching them to do the same thing. You're teaching them to run and run and run. Doesn't matter what it is. Things are tough. I'm going to run. I'm going to quit. I'm going to give up. So find ways to make it work. And that's my thoughts on that. Do you have any other thoughts before we dive into this next one? And he froze again. All right. So we're going to get into the next one. I'm love to hear your thoughts there, Michael. Okay. So number four here. My spouse is a huge disappointment. Sweet. He's still there, more or less. My spouse is a huge disappointment and he's a loser or a poor provider. She hasn't taken care of herself physically. I would never have married this person if I had known what I was getting myself into. I deserve better. These are some of the reasons here for number four, why they're a big disappointment. And I would say that these individuals are disappointments because that's our focus. Marriages, the spouse will fail. They will screw up. They're not going to be perfect. Like I've already mentioned, they're going to be at best a 4 out of 10. Maybe a 3 out of 10, but if you're lucky, they might be a 5 out of 10, but they're never going to be a 10 out of 10. They're going to screw up. And we need to make that crystal clear. We need to understand these things before going into a marriage. In these examples here that Tim Challenge has given, he's a poor provider. Well, what is he doing? Is he working his butt off? Is he trying to provide? Is he making the effort? I mean, he might not be making 6 digits, $100,000 a year. He might be only making $50,000 or maybe less, but he's doing what he can to provide. He might not have all the skills to become the next stockbroker or banker or whatever it is to be an entrepreneur in said field, but with what he's doing, with what he has available, his skills is he's doing what he can to provide. I mean, and I think that is the greatest example of being a provider, is to see that one is trying. Now, in relation to the woman here, she hasn't taken care of herself physically. This goes both ways. Men and women, not everybody takes care of themselves physically. I mean, I just had a burrito for dinner, and that's not exactly the healthiest thing. She hasn't taken care of herself physically. Well, talk to your individual. If you're not personally, if you don't find your spouse to be personally appealing, in a physical manner, if you say, "Hey, honey, I think you've kind of gained a little bit of weight. I think you could, I think it'd be really cool if you bulked up on your muscles, or you grew your hair out, or cut your hair, or let your facial hair grow, whatever it is." Listen to your spouse, and if it's something you're comfortable with, or if they make good reasons, logic says, "Hey, here's the pros and cons, whatever it is." For example, being healthy, physically healthy. I think there's good enough reason to consider that and say, "Hey, I think we could maybe go on a diet plan together. We can watch what we eat, or maybe we should go eat out less." Whatever it is, talk to this individual. Say, "Hey, honey, I love you. I'm concerned about your physical well-being. I personally, I'm attracted to this, and you're not this person anymore. You've packed on a few pounds." Just talk to them and be nice about it. Be loving. This is, I'm. Don't just say it's like, "Hey, you're fat." I mean, I don't know how else to better say it there, but show a sincere concern and be like, "Honey, I've known that you're not taking care of yourself as you used to when we were dating and we first got married. Is there anything going wrong? Is there anything that's concerning as far as why you're not doing those things anymore?" Michael is back in action. I love how you're having perfect, flawless technical difficulties.
It's awful. Everything is, but you're doing good, and I'm hearing everything. So
It's good.
good.
So I didn't even I just realized this. I mean, had so much to say about the headline. I didn't even say anything about the actual paragraph in which he writes. So Tim Challies on this says, "Even the best of marriages may enter lulls where thoughts like these remain prevalent for periods of time. Marriage can be hard. Of course it can. It's supposed to be. Well, not supposed to be. It just is. You can thank the fall for that. And go back to Genesis. You'll hear why. Genesis 3. Your spouse may grieve or disappoint you greatly. However, this is not a legitimate excuse to bolt, but an opportunity to outdo him or her in love, according to Romans 12:10. To grow in trust in the God who ordained your marriage, Proverbs 3:5-6, and to reflect the faithfulness of God until the very end." I would say that all of these really, and Michael, I'm actually kind of skimming through these a little bit, and I think to a degree, all of these are saying, I think actually it's one of our points. No, it's not. Okay, sweet. I can go ahead and share this. I think to a degree, all of these are saying, my love for you has its limits. My love for you is conditional. And I think that's really what divorce itself says is I married you until death do you part. I married you for better or worse, but it got worse. I don't like it. And that shows that itself shows the condition, the limitations of our love. It shows that we don't have an unconditional love. And I think ultimately it's a bad testimony if we pursue divorce, or it says, "Oh, this," for example, we just talked about, they're a poor provider, or she doesn't take care of herself. I wouldn't have never married this person. I deserve better. Those are basically saying that you have, I would personally say, impossible standards in regards to love, because to a degree, both men and women will somehow be a poor provider. We're going to lack in certain things. The whole, taking care of herself physically, that goes for both men and women. There's going to be areas when we want to eat Oreos, for an example. I just shared my niece. She loves Oreos. She's a really tiny woman, by the way. She's got like the metabolism, like the what's the guy's name? Looney Tunes Roadrunner. She's a toothpick, but I shared with her Oreos I saw this picture online, best way to eat Oreos, and it's basically take it out of the package, dump milk in the tray, grab a spoon, you're good to go. And me and her both are like, yes, that's the way to go. That's handling yourself poorly. I mean, you're going to pack on quite a few pounds with all that sugar. Was it worth it? Absolutely. So, number 5, actually, that's kind of goes along with the whole concept of love. Do you want to share that, or do you plan on freezing up on us again?
Yeah, I'll talk fast. We are no longer in love. If God commands us to love our enemies, Matthew 5:44, we can love our spouse even if we can't muster those romantic feelings that once defined the dating or the honeymoon phases. The marriage covenant is binding until death, not until one or both of you falls out of love. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "It is no longer your love that sustains the marriage, but from now on the marriage that sustains your love." When you love your spouse out of obedience to Christ, trust that God can help it grow from the heart and restore the romance that's been lost.
Yeah, and I love this one. We're no longer in love, and my question is why? Why? What prompted you to fall in love in the first place? And then you can come up with all these excuses. Oh well, they did such and such, and did all these things. We used to go on these fun adventures
Because they tried and you've stopped trying.
Exactly.
Most
And
of it. Like,
and
you
that's
spend
the
quality time, you care about the other person, and then you're living together and living separate lives, and you don't
yeah.
care, and you don't communicate, and you don't do anything you did to win their affection,
Yeah.
basically.
And that's the biggest thing is, if you don't feel like you're no longer in love, is because, and this obviously happened. Let's say, for example, what are we in, June, July? Let's say, I don't know. I'm giving a scenario here. I fell out of love, I don't know, January. Okay. I'm giving a scenario here. This is not true at all. I'm not a single man here, but I'm married to this individual. And just this year, we've been married for quite a few years and been madly in love with this individual. And this year alone, I haven't really been feeling as if I'm in love with this individual anymore. What's happened? What's caused this to happen? Why am I no longer having these feelings? This, individual could be, busy with whatever else they're doing. Busy with work. For an example, my sister. I'm very bad, very, very bad. But my sister's, she travels a lot. Okay, this is where the idea is coming from. She's all over. I mean, she's been married to this individual, my brother-in-law for like 10, 15 years or something like that. Well, my niece, she's 16. I think she's like 3 or 4 when they got married. So yeah, about, 13, 14 years, somewhere around there. But anyways, she's all over the place. But they make time to do husband, wife, or even family stuff. They're dedicated. Now, the problem here is, and I'm completely going off on a completely different example, but the point is, there are reasons why you're not in love with this individual anymore. It's because you both are guilty of not making time for this individual. When you first got together, you guys were nuts about each other. You fell in love because you found somebody that you could spend your time with and enjoy spending your time with. You got married, did marriage stuff, whatever that would consist of, and then something happened to where you're no longer doing stuff. And that's where the falling out happens. And I would, I'm taking this out of context, but I would go remember the words of Jesus Christ, to go back to our first love, to remember why we fell in love in the first place, and repeat that. Go on dates. Go to the very first place that you guys met. Go see a movie together, and do these things frequently. And my personal, and I get it, if kids come into play, it's a little bit difficult. I would say at bare minimum, make sure that you have husband and wife time at least once a month. I would probably say more than that, but obviously don't have any kids to give you a little, more sense on that. Michael, any other thoughts before we go on number 2, 6, 7, whatever we're on? 6.
We've got to keep this going, so let's keep going.
All right.
Good one.
Actually, oh yeah, 44 minutes in. Sweet.
Speed round.
Yeah. Is this my turn to read? This is my turn. I married the wrong person, or we were too young. Well, first off, no and no. Here's what, before I give my 2 cents on this, let's go ahead and give Tim Challies a chance to talk. Perhaps the marriage was built on foundations of sand. Maybe your spouse does not meet your present criteria for a godly husband or wife. That does not mean that your soulmate is still out there waiting for you. The idea of a soulmate is not rooted in anything scriptural. In other words, there's no such thing as a soulmate biblically. Some will try actually go to First Samuel, talking about what's that, soul ties. I've heard some heretics try to use that. Oh, we lost Michael again, but that's not the case. There's the soul ties itself is just basically a way of saying, or their souls they're closely knit. That's Samuel. That's their way of saying we had a close relationship. Anyways, there's nothing biblical with soulmates. Continuing on with this, the person God intended for you is the person you are with now. If you are struggling with these thoughts, you would do well to confess the sin of disobedience or foolishness before God. 1 John 1:8. Receive God's forgiveness and continue in the assurance that God works all things together for our good. Romans 8:28. So I'd agree with 100% with this. When you say you're married to the wrong person, that is not true. The reason you are married to this individual is because God has ordained you to be married to this individual. In his divine providence, he brought you together. And there were things happening. These excuses, I married the wrong person, or we were too young. These come up and, some sort of justification. Well, I made a stupid mistake. That's usually where it comes with, I was young and dumb when I did this. This isn't who I thought it would be, but this is the person you need to be with. And I would personally say, I would emphasize Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But I would also encourage you to think of Paul in 2 Corinthians when he is dealing with his thorn in the flesh. He's wanting this to get to be done with. He's wanting to get out of his life. And God says, my grace is sufficient for you. That is an important aspect, because in marriage, we need to understand that our spouse is not going to be perfect. And we need to recognize that God has brought you two together. And he says, I know this isn't what you've expected. I know your marriage isn't perfect, but you know what? You're not perfect either, but I still chose you. I still married you. I still called you my bride. My grace is sufficient. My care, my providence, everything that I have to give you as a believer, it's all there. And I'm asking you to love this individual just as I have loved you. Number 7, while we're still waiting, I don't think he's going to be coming back here anytime soon. Michael's obviously having some technical difficulties, so this is going to be kind of a party crash. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, kind of a bummer, but stuff happens. But I'm glad we're still able to record. I hope we're still recording. I hope it's actually not me that has these technical issues. My camera itself looks just peaches and cream. In fact, actually, let me go to our page real quick, and I want to see if this is actually functioning properly, because I don't want to end up coming on here and okay, so we got a little something. Okay, so we're good. So anyways, continuing on with this, once I get the right thing up here, we are actually running short on time. Let me so we have the link in the description of the podcast, and we'll actually have it on we have the link in the description. I owe it to myself to be happy, and God wouldn't want me to be unhappy. That's absolutely true. I'm going to rephrase that. It's not true. Happiness is not, how do I want to say this? Happiness shouldn't be because of our situation. I think of the fruits of the Spirit found in Galatians. Joy itself is one of them. And within that, we find joy in all circumstances, even the trials, because we're going to face these things. But we can know that these things there's good to come out of this. In my own experience that I had, it was a nightmare, but my grace is sufficient was the thing that kept playing on my mind. Welcome back.
Oh man, Bill, what an adventure!
You know, I gotta give you props though. You're at least consistent and determined to stick around. So
Are we on number 7?
we're on number 7. I kind of just cracked that open.
Okay, so we go to 8.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and go to 8 because I lost my train of thought.
All right, my marriage is a constant struggle. If any of the above cases illustrating bad reasons to divorce, believers can be faithful to the vows that they made, even if their marriage is a struggle. If you believe that you can be happier outside of the will of God, then you are a captive to a lie crafted by Satan. Do you really want to pit yourself against the sovereignty and wisdom of God? Galatians 6:7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap." It is better to struggle through marriage than to defy God by breaking the marriage covenant.
Absolutely.
That's like the harshest one yet. The most like, boom.
Well, yeah, there's a number 10 in there. I'd like to actually throw in there. No, number 10, number 11. I've got number 11 in mind. What number was that? Number 7, 8?
Right.
That was 8. Okay. Yeah, and I think we need to recognize it's like, who cares? I mean, it's kind of
life is a struggle. Good
exactly.
luck. If you haven't been struggling yet, like, where are you living?
Right. And marriages aren't perfect. Life is not perfect. Jobs aren't perfect. There's nothing here on this earth that is perfect. Well, besides the Oreos that I mentioned earlier, that is perfect. But yeah, when it comes to everyday life, there's always going to be shortcomings. There's always going to be failures. There's always going to be mistakes. There's always going to be struggles. And if we're saying it's like, yeah, our marriage is struggling, we'll fix it. If you're having a struggle, don't give up. The fact that you're giving up says that it's that like I said earlier, you have the limitations. You will only go into marriage so far. But that's what I'm going to leave my thoughts on that, because there's so much more I really want to say a lot. Number 9 says, all my friends say that I ought to leave him or her. Even friends with the best intentions can lead you astray. And that is why it is important to commit yourself to the full counsel of God in his word, allowing that to become your ultimate counselor. No matter what differing opinions you hear from everyone else, this is also why it is so important to choose your friends wisely and stay away from bad company. Psalm 1:1 and 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3. Bad company corrupts good fruit. Surround yourself with people whose wisdom is grounded in biblical truth, not those who will promote bad reasons to divorce. Absolutely. And I think we can be guilty of this, of throwing this divorce on the table. Such and such person, my mom and dad see this, they saw these red flags, or, whatever other justifiable excuse, or if you stay married to this individual, then we're no longer friends, or we're going to write you out of the will, whatever.
And you're like, I made a covenant to the spouse, not you.
Exactly. So, I mean, we need to be able to make those sacrifices when they come. Like there was actually, well, I don't want to go too much into it because I don't know too much detail. I saw an article in one of the groups I'm on Facebook. Somebody actually was sharing some thoughts. They apparently were threatened to be written out of the will because of their relationship. Yeah, that was some time ago. I didn't read the full thing, so I'm not going to go share what I don't know. But yeah, I mean, your friends can give you bad advice. I mean, yes, they have good intentions. Yes, they want what's best for you. Yes, they see these dangers. They see these struggles that you're going through. But I would argue, I don't think I shared this yet, but I would argue that the reason struggles happen and the reason they're so frequent is because that's our focus. We're looking for the failures in our spouse. We're looking in the fact that they didn't dress up and look fancy for dinner the other night. The fact that they just stuck a TV dinner in the microwave and said, "Here you go," or the fact that Michael, help me out here. I need to criticize them. What men do that they shouldn't do.
Oh, they're lazy slobs, make a mess.
You said those very quick, like you're a pro.
No, just go through all the renters we've had. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to clean up after them.
Yeah.
Definitely would not marry any of them.
So yeah, so yeah, I mean, the more we focus on these things, rather than looking at the good, that's really what we're going to be dwelling on, and that's all we're going to see. We're going to have a tunnel vision. We're not going to see the efforts that they're putting into this. We're not going to see the. Well, actually, that's the short version. That's all I have for that.
Yeah, I would say too, hopefully you are surrounding yourself with biblically sound friends. Of course, you can have friends that are not Christians,
Yeah.
but those are not the ones you're seeking counsel from. This says go to God first. There's steps you would take, and I would hope that most people, the longer you're in a marriage, if you are a Christian and going to church, reading your Bible, praying, doing all of that, that you would be surrounded by friends that would never even come up. They wouldn't even mention that, because it's not the right thing to do. It would be like, what did you just say to me? No. Like, a friend would not say that if they're in that position.
Yeah. Well, and see, one of the blessings, I mean, for close friends, is they're going to slap you across the face. And I've shared this, quite a few times in the past. My best friend is practically my brother, or he's like a brother to me. And we both are willing to basically hit each other with a brick when we need to be hit with a brick. And I mean, sometimes we do need to hear that, but at the same time, like you said, and like we have here in this article, sometimes they're not going to give good advice. Like I particularly remember, and I want to share this anonymously. Well, Michael, I shared it with you previously, but through my own struggle, I actually had an individual that I'm close with, and they were practically begging me in my situation to divorce my wife at that time. And I was like, I've got a biblical duty. They were even, since bribing me, this is, they'll pay for the divorce. It's like, that's not your job. I've got a biblical duty and a mandate as a husband or as a spouse. We'll just keep it general. I've got an obligation to my Lord and to my spouse. I'm not going to let you do this. And to understand that, I mean, they were understanding. They commended me for, my views on that. They did not personally agree with it, but because of the dangers, and which another story. But Michael, actually, we're short on time. This last one here, I want to read this here, and then I want to dive into my number 11. I don't want to give too many comments on this this particular one, because we're short on time. But number 10 here is that God will forgive me. The Apostle Paul directly addresses this in Romans 6, 1 through 2. What shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that may grace may abounds? By no means. How can we who died to sin live in that? And I would actually point out, excuse me, I had too much carbonation. The by no means, that's an exclamation, and that is an emphatic, absolutely not, in like the loudest resounding no that you can possibly think. Besides the point, little Greek study there. Our God is full of grace, but that should not cause us to take advantage of it by being bound to sin. Instead, it should cause us to live in the freedom of his will, desirous of keeping his commands. Christ died so that we would no longer be slaves to sin, but slaves to righteousness. And Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. John 14:15. If you truly love Christ, you will not separate what God has joined together. Mark 10, verse 9. And I would also add to that in 1 John, where John actually marks is that we keep his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. Basically, what he's saying there is the Christian delights in being obedient. Obedience is a fruit of the salvation. It's not a root, or it's not a bite. It's not the, what's the word? Not cause. It's not the reason we're saved. I'm getting those words mixed up. We're not saved because of our obedience, but we're obedience because of our salvation. That's where I want to get at. Michael, my number 11 here is unfaithfulness. I remember this. I have to. I'm keeping this completely anonymous, but there's an individual that I know. They were guilty, and I don't know how deep it was. That was none of my business. I still didn't even care, but they were guilty of being flirtatious with another individual other than their spouse. And I don't know how long it was going on, but one day this individual came to me and told me, it's like, hey, I thought I'd let you know before this gets out. This is what I've done. I'm guilty of this. And he wanted to apologize to me. Well, I said it was another gentleman. And I told him straight up, it's like, okay, as far as I'm concerned, it's water under the bridge. I'm not even going to hold this against you. And I actually got to give huge commendations for this individual. Yes, they screwed up. They were exposed. Their spouse actually found out. And but regardless, I am glad that this individual came to me and said, hey, I screwed up here. I've wanted to talk to you so many times about this struggle. I didn't. But so on. And I think that's another reason, unjustifiable reason, is adultery. Adultery itself is permitted reason for divorce, but it's not commanded. I mean, we are still commanded to show love. We're still commanded to show forgiveness. If the spouse is unfaithful, if they repent of this is okay. I forgive you. Let's put these boundaries in place. And I think we talked a little bit about that last week, but I would say, in all sorts of situations, if you're having struggle in a marriage and you've had this thought come into play, which you feel as if things are falling apart, make the necessary changes in your life. Get counseling. Figure out what sin is in your life, because if you're going down this path of I no longer love this individual or we're drifting apart, both are guilty of sin somewhere, and you need to address that. And like I said, go back to your first love. So, Michael, do you have any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say make sure you're both reading your Bible, praying, and doing it together as well as on your own, making sure you're prioritizing that.
Yeah.
That alone will be important. Good communication, making sure you are communicating, finding times where you can sit and just talk about whatever's coming up. This is like how to avoid it, not even be married myself, but like just on the basis of having a good relationship, whether it's married with your friends, your family, like you need to spend time with one another. And then I heard from another podcast of married men saying, when you're about to do something, you need to put out your expectations. And then if your expectations are not met, because that's a lot of problems they had said of like, people are so upset and they're like, why are you upset? They're like, well, I thought it was going to be like this. And it's like, did you let me know? Did you let the other person know, like, I'm expecting this and I'm really hoping for this. And so a lot of that I think goes back to communication, but that's something I'm holding on to. I'm like, ooh, we got to talk about our expectations. And I think a lot of the reason why, if you do get married, maybe this is why people don't want to get married at churches. A lot of them, like ours, will make you go through counseling with a pastor on staff. And I know that's really helpful to talk about some of those expectations when it comes to marriage and finances. And, when hard times come, how do you deal with this? Are you someone who runs away from it, or do you hit it straight on? And I think that is really important to know what you're getting into, so that, to close, you should never even be thinking you can get out of it. Right. That's a lot of these when I was like, oh, well, I would, if they stop looking pretty, well, guess what? Beauty's going to fade too. So for myself, and, that is not why you're marrying them. Like, you need to make sure you build a good relationship now while you are young and beautiful, I guess you could say, but you're with them for the long run. So a lot of these should not even cross your mind. As you mentioned, Bill, like you shouldn't, as soon as you start thinking that, saying it, like, you've lost the battle almost. Not saying that you can redeem, you cannot not redeem it, but ooh.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, it's a big ooh. But I was going to share this previously before we got into this, and I didn't, and we kind of got off on this. And then, a bunch of technical difficulties. Michael's bailing, then he's deciding to come back. Well, then he's bored and bailing again. And but anyways, besides the point here is I wanted to share this before we even got started on this. Is I mentioned it last week, and I want to mention it again this week. If you have any struggles with your relationship, and I don't care if you're married or just dating, this is something that I believe 100%, and I strongly advise this. In fact, there's a friend's daughter, which I actually have a copy I'm going to be giving to, because I asked them, I was like, hey, would you like this? Because they just started dating, and then they want a healthy marriage, or they want to be the woman she needs to be. So anyways, bottom line is The Exemplary Husband by Stuart Scott, and then The Excellent Wife by Martha Peace. We have the link in the description of the video. and then we'll also have it in the podcast. I would encourage you to click the links and get yourself a copy. If you're a man, you don't need to be married to have to check this out. This book is great for preparation for marriage. So if you're a man, I would encourage you to get yourself The Exemplary Husband. You're going to find it to be phenomenal, and read it just as you would the Bible. It is a biblical based book. It was endorsed by MacArthur as well. Surprise. But it is wonderful. I've have every single page underlined something, and it's encouraging that, I agree with certain things and I was convicted by certain things, and that's what's going to happen. The same way as you read the Bible, you read for encouragement, you read to be convicted, to be transformed. This book will also do that. And then women, I can't speak too much on Martha Peace's book, The Excellent Wife, but I would encourage you to check that out. They both work in harmony, both man and wife's version. And I would, for lack of better words, I would say it's an excellent book to make an excellent wife. This coming from a guy that hasn't read it. So if you're looking to be who you need to be, who God has required us to be within a relationship, I would encourage you to get these books. So that is my 2 cents. Michael, do you have any closing thoughts? Actually, I think I already asked you that, didn't I?
Yeah, we're closed.
All right. Well, you guys have yourself a wonderful time. If you guys are listening, we didn't have anybody. We had somebody chime in live, but nobody left too many comments. Not worried about that. It's out there. This is here for you guys. It will remain there. So without further ado, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, anything else, feel free to get a hold of us, cc412.org, Christian Cornerstone 412 Ministries, on Facebook or in the comments in this podcast. So without further ado, Michael, take us out.
Thank you for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider supporting this ministry. You can do so in a number of ways. You can comment and rate the show. Your interaction will help us improve the show and also help others find us. You can share the show and ministry with your friends in order to help strengthen their walk of faith. And finally, you can support us financially by becoming a supporting member. Members will have early access to content created, as well as discounted or free material as a special thanks through our Patreon platform. And that's not all. As a supporting member, you have the chance of being invited onto the show as a special guest to share your own story. I'm Michael White, and this is Christian Cornerstone 412 Ministry Podcast.